Hello, this is Professor Fred Krantz, Director of the Canadian Institute for Jewish Research. We're bringing you today the 9th Isralert, our series of weekly analyses of various aspects of Israel and Middle Eastern politics and history. The date is March 18th, 2013. It's a Monday, and we're going to be speaking today about the impending visit of U.S. President Barack Obama to Israel on Wednesday, the 20th of the coming week. This is the first official visit of President Obama since he was elected 5 years ago, since the very first term, which he has now extended into a second term by being re-elected. As you may know, there isn't exactly a great deal of love lost between the American president and the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, also known by his nickname of Bibi. It's in a sense good that Bibi has recently been re-elected also, and that he has finally put together a coalition government in Israel. And Israel, as you know, has a proportional representation system with many parties, such that no one party ever wins a plurality, a majority, and governments have to be stitched together by bringing together often unwilling, recalcitrant, sometimes opposed factions. So Bibi, in this case, has put together a government a few days before the American president arrives. And it's an interesting government because it's rather broadly based for Israeli coalitions. There's Bibi's own party, the Likud, the single biggest party in the Knesset, along with its joint ally, a party called Yisrael Beitenu, Israel Our Home, led by Lieberman, who's been the foreign minister. And he's managed to bring into his coalition three other groups, two major, one small. The small one is a party with only 6 votes, led by Tzipi Livni, who was the former creator and leader of the Kadima group. That changed, and she has a small party which she has brought into the coalition. The two major elements alongside her, one is called Yesh Latid, yes, we have a future, led by a man named Lapid, the center-left figure, a former television personality, who represents middle-class secular Israelis. And the other large party, fairly large party, that Netanyahu has brought into the coalition is the Yisrael HaYehudi. It's called Bayit HaYehudi, the Jewish Home Party, led by Bennett, who is a center-right figure who emerged out of the so-called settler movement in the territories in Judea and Samaria, what critics of Israel call the West Bank. And in a way, he's squared the circle, Netanyahu, because he's brought together this secular center-left grouping and a religious far-right as to the visit of Obama. He's been under a good deal of pressure, party and other forces, to come to Israel. Why precisely he has waited 5 years to do so is not clear. The thrust of his Israel policy has been to, unlike previous presidents, including Democratic presidents, to distance himself somewhat from Israel, this despite continuing overwhelming American popular support for the Jewish state. But, you know, from the time of his Cairo speech, a year into his own first term, he has seemed to, in fact, be trying to cultivate the Arab world, to connect it more closely to America, to differentiate his policy from the policy of his predecessors, both George Bush and Clinton, before Bush. Now we see what some commentators are calling something of a shift. He will principally be in Israel for the several days of the visit. He will visit with the Palestinian Authority briefly, but most of the events being planned are Israel-related events. There has evidently gone a lot of planning has gone into this on the part of the two presidents' teams, prime minister and president's teams, to ensure smooth personal relationships The Israelis are bending over backwards not to say or do anything that might create conflict or embarrass the American president. So most commentators are hoping for what could be a routine heads of state visit, and one which conveys unmistakably continuing American support for Israel. On the other hand, other commentators argue that the relative comity of this meeting doesn't change certain orientations of American foreign policy under Obama. One of them is a much more positive view still of the Arab Spring than is the case in Tel Aviv. Obama supported the overthrow of Mubarak. He finally supported the overthrow of the Libyan dictator Gaddafi. He is finally moving now to, it looks, with a new Secretary of State, Kerry, to orient the America more closely with the rebels in Syria through support. Therefore, there are some changes. But the general tendency of American foreign policy under Obama has been to keep a kind of distance from Israel and from its center-right leader, Likud, and also to, while critiquing the Iranian move on a nuclear weapon, to do so through arguing that diplomacy may still work, channels should be kept open, and that an increasingly demanding regime of sanctions, particularly on the Iranian economy and the sale of oil and the transactions of banking transactions, would be sufficient to change the direction of the Israeli nuclear thrust, the Iranian nuclear thrust. To date, that is not the case. The sanction regime seems to be biting, as they say, but not sufficiently to make any real dent in the direction of Iranian policy. And the best estimates of people in the atomic energy field are that Iran is now, with a lot more centrifuges, producing a lot more uranium and in certain cases plutonium, drawing closer to having sufficient material to produce two or three, very soon, 2 or 3 bombs. That is not the same thing as mounting miniaturized warheads on intercontinental missiles. That is some years away. But it's argued that once the Iranians have the material for a bomb, their power will be augmented greatly, their influence in the region will go up, and Israel will be faced with a fait accompli. Therefore, the people who do a nuclear analysis, military analysis, argue that Israel will have to intervene with or without American support before the Iranians become nuclear capable. And that's 6 months to a year, could be sooner. Surely this will be on the table when Bibi and Obama sit down at state dinners and have a private chat in the course of the coming visit. What will be said, what the atmospherics of what will be said will be, we cannot tell at this point. Most Israeli commentators, whether they're left or right, are hoping for at least a routine visit, with no upsets, no surprises, no overt conflicts. The real issue, what will America do in relation to Iran's weapon, emergent weapon, and what will Israel do, and how will the two conjugate their relationships, that clearly will have to be settled after the American visit. Thank you very much. We'll keep our eye on this. Shalom. Look forward to seeing you on the next Isralert next week.